Zara Northfield stepped off the dusty stagecoach into the sweltering heat of Winnetka, Texas, in the summer of 1878, clutching her leather satchel filled with books that most men in this God-forsaken town probably could not even read. The driver had warned her 3 times during the journey that a woman of her education and refinement would find nothing but disappointment in a cattle town. But Zara had learned long ago that men underestimated her at their own peril. She was 24 years old, a graduate of Vassar College in New York, and she had not traveled nearly 1,000 miles to be deterred by ignorant assumptions about what a woman could or could not accomplish on the frontier. The main street stretched before her like a ribbon of packed earth, flanked by wooden buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support. A saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, and at the far end, a small white building that must be the schoolhouse she had been hired to manage. Zara adjusted her navy traveling dress and lifted her chin, refusing to acknowledge the stares of the men lounging outside the saloon. Their eyes followed her with a mixture of curiosity and something else she could not quite name, perhaps amusement at her Eastern clothes and proper bearing. "You must be Miss Northfield," a woman's voice called out, and Zara turned to see a plump, kind-faced woman hurrying toward her from the general store. "I am Mrs. Patterson, wife of the mayor. We are so pleased you have arrived. The children have been without proper schooling for nearly 6 months since our last teacher married and moved to San Antonio." Zara shook the woman's offered hand, grateful for a friendly face. "Thank you for the welcome. I am eager to begin my work, Mrs." Patterson's expression grew slightly apologetic. "I should warn you, dear, the young men in this town can be rather rough around the edges. Most of them never had much schooling themselves, and they tend to be somewhat forward with new arrivals, especially pretty young ladies such as yourself. Do not pay them any mind." As if on cue, a group of cowboys sauntered past, their spurs jingling with each step. One of them, a sandy-haired man with a crooked smile, tipped his hat. "Madam," he drawled, his eyes lingering on her face. Zara nodded curtly and turned back to Mrs. Patterson, who was already guiding her down the street toward a modest boarding house. "You will stay with Mrs. Chen, who runs our boarding establishment. She is a wonderful woman, came here from San Francisco 10 years ago with her late husband. The room is small but clean, and the meals are excellent." The boarding house was indeed clean, though sparse, and Mrs. Chen was everything Mrs. Patterson had promised, an efficient woman in her 50s who showed Zara to her room with minimal fuss and maximum kindness. Left alone in the small space with its narrow bed, washstand, and single window overlooking the street, Zara finally allowed herself to feel the weight of exhaustion from her journey. She had left New York 3 weeks ago, determined to prove that her expensive education could serve a greater purpose than hosting tea parties and making advantageous marriages. Her parents had been horrified by her decision. Her father, a successful banker, had wanted her to marry Thomas Whitmore, a man of suitable breeding and fortune who found Zara's intelligence intimidating rather than attractive. The engagement had lasted 3 months before Zara broke it off, unable to bear the thought of a lifetime pretending to be less than she was for the sake of a man's ego. When she had seen the advertisement seeking a schoolteacher for a small Texas town, it had felt like providence. The next morning, Zara woke before dawn and prepared herself carefully for her first day. She chose a sensible brown dress with a high collar and pinned her dark hair into a severe bun. When she entered the schoolhouse at 7 o'clock, she found it dusty and disorganized, with textbooks scattered across broken desks, and a blackboard so filthy she could barely see its surface. Rolling up her sleeves, She spent the next 2 hours cleaning and arranging the space until it resembled a proper place of learning. At 9 o'clock, her students began to arrive. They ranged in age from 6 to 14, the children of shopkeepers, ranchers, and the few professional men in town. Most seemed eager enough, though clearly accustomed to lenient standards. Zara introduced herself and immediately set about assessing their current knowledge levels, discovering with some dismay that few of them could write beyond basic sentences, and their arithmetic was rudimentary at best. "We will be working very hard this year," she announced, her voice firm but not unkind. "Education is the key to advancement in this world, and I intend to see that each of you reaches your full potential." A boy in the back row, perhaps 13 years old, raised his hand. "My pa says book learning does not matter much when you are herding cattle. He says what matters is knowing how to rope and ride and shoot straight." Zara met his eyes steadily. "Your father is correct that practical skills are important. However, a man who can only work with his hands will always be at the mercy of men who can work with their minds. If you wish to own your own ranch someday rather than simply working for wages, you will need to understand contracts, manage accounts, and negotiate with buyers who will be happy to cheat an uneducated man." The boy considered this and nodded slowly, seeming satisfied with her answer. Zara felt a small surge of satisfaction. This was why she had come, to open minds and create possibilities where none had existed before. The days fell into a rhythm. Zara taught from 9 until 3, preparing her lessons in the early mornings and late evenings. Her students proved more capable than their previous education had suggested, responding well to her high expectations and structured approach. She introduced them to literature beyond their basic primers, reading aloud from Shakespeare and Dickens, and was rewarded by their rapt attention even from the oldest boys who had initially seemed skeptical. The adults in town were another matter. Zara quickly discovered that her education intimidated many of them, particularly the men. When she stopped at the general store to purchase supplies, the proprietor seemed flustered by her precise vocabulary and detailed questions about the origin of his goods. When she attended Sunday services at the small church, she found herself largely ignored by the other unmarried women, who seemed to view her as either too proud or too strange to merit their friendship. The Cowboys were the worst, or perhaps the most obvious in their reactions. They would fall silent when she passed, or else make exaggerated shows of removing their hats and affecting refined manners that were clearly meant to mock her. One evening, as she walked back to the boarding house after staying late to prepare lessons, she heard laughter from the saloon and realized the men inside were discussing her. "Too educated for her own good, that schoolteacher," one voice declared. "A woman has got no business filling her head with all those books, makes her think she is better than honest working men." "Pretty, though," another voice countered. "Shame she is such a bluestocking. Man would have to be a damned professor to hold a conversation with her." Zara felt her face flush with anger and humiliation, but she kept walking, her spine straight and her eyes forward. Let them think what they would. She had not come to Winnetka to win the approval of ignorant men. 3 months into her tenure, autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and preparations for the town's harvest festival. Mrs. Patterson stopped by the schoolhouse one afternoon to invite Zara to attend. "It would do you good to socialize a bit, dear," the older woman said gently. "I know you have been feeling isolated. The townspeople need time to adjust to someone as accomplished as yourself, but they are good people at heart." Zara agreed to attend, though without much enthusiasm. The festival was held on a Saturday in early October, with tables of food set up in the town square and a makeshift stage for music and dancing. Zara wore her best dress, a deep green silk that had been fashionable in New York 2 years prior, and allowed Mrs. Chen to style her hair in a softer arrangement than her usual severe bun. When she arrived, she found the entire town gathered for the celebration. Children ran between the tables while women arranged dishes and men stood in clusters discussing cattle prices and weather. Zara accepted a cup of cider and stood somewhat apart, watching the festivities with the detachment of an outsider. "You look like you are observing a scientific specimen rather than enjoying a party," a voice said beside her, and she turned to find a tall man with dark hair and sharp gray eyes studying her with apparent amusement. He was perhaps 30 years old, dressed in well-worn but clean ranch clothes, with the sun-weathered skin of someone who spent his days outdoors. "And you are?" Zara asked coolly, already preparing to deflect whatever crude flirtation was about to follow. "Adam Xavier," he said, extending his hand. "I own a ranch about 5 miles north of town, and before you dismiss me as another ignorant cowboy, I should mention that I read your copy of Plato's Republic when you left it on the bench outside the schoolhouse last week. I took the liberty of returning it to Mrs. Chen so it would not be damaged by the elements." Zara stared at him, completely caught off guard. "You read Plato?" "I did attend Harvard for 3 years before my father died, and I had to return home to manage the ranch," Adam said, his tone matter-of-fact rather than boastful. "I found your notations in the margins quite insightful, particularly your observations about the application of justice in frontier communities where formal law is often more theoretical than practical." For the first time since arriving in Winnetka, Zara found herself genuinely speechless. She studied Adam more carefully, noting the intelligence in his eyes and the way he held himself with quiet confidence rather than the swagger typical of most cowboys she had encountered. "I apologize for my rudeness," she said finally. "I've grown accustomed to being dismissed or mocked for my education. I did not expect to find someone who shared my interests." "This town has a limited view of what cowboys should be," Adam said, and now there was an edge to his voice. "Most of these men are good at what they do, but they have made a virtue of ignorance, as if being uneducated makes them more authentic somehow. I learned early on that it was easier to keep my background quiet than to constantly defend the fact that a man can read Greek and still rope a steer." "Why did you leave Harvard?" Zara asked, her curiosity genuine. "My father had a stroke. I was the oldest son and the ranch was failing. I had to choose between my education and my family's survival." He shrugged. "It was not really a choice at all. But I have continued reading and studying when I can. The life of the mind does not require a university, only discipline and access to books." "And where do you find books in Winnetka, Texas?" "I order them from a bookseller in Boston. It takes months for them to arrive, but I have built up a decent library. You would be welcome to borrow from it if you wish." Adam paused, then added, "In fact, I would be honored if you would visit the ranch sometime. I have no one to discuss literature or philosophy with, and I confess I have been lonely for intellectual companionship." Zara felt something shift inside her, a wall she had built beginning to crack. "I would like that very much," she said softly. They spent the rest of the evening in conversation, standing apart from the crowd, speaking of books and ideas with an intensity that made Zara forget where she was. Adam had read widely, everything from the classical philosophers to modern works of science and political theory. He challenged her interpretations, offered his own insights, and listened with genuine interest when she explained her theories about education and social reform. It was the most intellectually stimulating conversation she had experienced since leaving college, and she found herself laughing with real pleasure for the first time in months. When the music started and couples began to dance, Adam asked if she would join him. Zara hesitated, aware of the eyes turning toward them, but Adam simply offered his hand and waited. She took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, evidence of hard physical labor that somehow did not contradict the refined mind she had just discovered. They danced, and Zara was acutely aware of how well they fit together, how naturally Adam led and how easily she followed. Around them, she could hear the whispers, see the curious and sometimes disapproving glances. The educated schoolteacher and the cowboy rancher, an unlikely pairing that would no doubt fuel gossip for weeks. "Let them talk," Adam said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "I stopped concerning myself with the opinions of small minds years ago." "Easy for you to say," Zara replied. "You were born here. They may think you are odd, but you are one of them. I am an outsider." "Then perhaps we outsiders should stick together," Adam said, and the warmth in his eyes made Zara's breath catch. After that night, Adam became a regular presence in Zara's life. He would stop by the schoolhouse in the late afternoons, often bringing books from his library for her to borrow. They would sit on the steps in the slanting autumn sunlight, discussing what they had read, debating ideas, challenging each other's assumptions. Zara discovered that Adam had a brilliant mind, perhaps even sharper than many of her college professors, honed by solitary study and practical application. He told her about his life, how he had grown up on the ranch, the son of a father who valued education and had ensured his children received the best schooling available. Adam had two younger sisters who had married and moved east, one to St. Louis and one to Chicago. His mother had died when he was 16, and his father's death 3 years later had left him alone with the responsibility of a struggling ranch and 5 cowboys who depended on him for their wages. "I was 22 and had no idea what I was doing," Adam admitted. "But I learned, through trial and plenty of error. The men who work for me now are good workers, loyal, and they do not care that I sometimes quote Shakespeare when I am thinking through a problem." Zara shared her own story, the suffocating expectations of New York society, her parents' disappointment in her choices, the broken engagement with Thomas Whitmore, who had once told her that her intelligence was unattractive in a woman. "Then he was a fool," Adam said flatly. "Your intelligence is the most attractive thing about you, and that is saying something given that you are beautiful enough to stop traffic." Zara felt her cheeks warm. "You are quite bold, Mr. Xavier. I have learned that life is too short for false modesty or game playing," Adam said. "I like you, Miss Northfield. I like your mind and your spirit and your refusal to diminish yourself for the comfort of others. And unless I am very much mistaken, you feel something similar toward me." He was right, of course. Zara had felt herself falling, slowly and then all at once, into something that felt like love but also like coming home. With Adam, she did not have to pretend or hide or make herself smaller. He matched her intellectually, challenged her assumptions, and treated her as an equal in a way no man ever had before. But more than that, she admired his strength, both physical and moral, the way he had sacrificed his own dreams to fulfill his duty, and how he had refused to let his mind atrophy despite the isolation of frontier life. "I do feel something," she admitted, "but I am frightened. I came here to escape the expectations of one world. I do not want to fall into the expectations of another." "What expectations?" Adam asked. "That you will give up teaching to become a rancher's wife. I would never ask that of you. Your work matters, Zara. Those children need you." What I am asking is whether you might be willing to build a life that includes both your calling and something more." "What does that life look like?" Zara asked, her heart beating faster. "Come to the ranch tomorrow," Adam said. "Let me show you." She went the following Sunday after church, riding in the wagon Adam sent for her. The Xavier Ranch spread across a wide valley, with good grazing land and a creek that ran year-round. The ranch house was larger than Zara had expected, a well-built structure with real glass windows and a wide porch. Inside, she found a home that reflected Adam's character, simple but not crude, with books lining shelves in the main room and comfortable furniture that spoke of a man who valued both function and beauty. "My mother decorated most of it," Adam said, watching Zara explore. "She had good taste and a practical sensibility. I have kept things much as she left them." Zara ran her fingers along the book spines, recognizing titles that made her eyes widen. "You have Aristotle in the original Greek. My father believed in thorough education. I learned Greek and Latin alongside reading and writing. He used to say that the ancient languages taught precision of thought. Your father was a wise man. He was. I wish you could have known him. He would have adored you." Adam moved to stand beside her at the bookshelf. "I have been thinking about what you said about expectations. I want to be clear about what I am offering, Zara. I am not a rich man, though the ranch does well enough. I work hard, long hours, and ranch life can be difficult. But I can promise you intellectual companionship, respect for your independence, and a partnership built on equality. If you became my wife, I would want you to continue teaching as long as you wished. We could build a life together that honors both of our callings." Zara turned to face him, her heart in her throat. "You are proposing marriage." "I am. Though I realize we have known each other only a short time, I am 30 years old and have met enough people to recognize something extraordinary when I find it. You are extraordinary, Zara Northfield. I love your mind and your courage and your refusal to compromise your principles. I think we could be very happy together." "I love you too," Zara said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I have been trying not to, telling myself it was too soon, too impractical, too risky. But I do love you, Adam Xavier. And yes, I will marry you." Adam pulled her into his arms, and when he kissed her, Zara felt as if every decision she had made, every risk she had taken, had led her to this moment. His lips were warm and gentle, then more insistent, and she responded with a passion that surprised them both. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Adam rested his forehead against hers. "I will make you happy," he promised. "I swear it." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church, with most of the town in attendance. The gossips had plenty to say about the whirlwind courtship, but Zara found she did not care. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears and declared it the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed. Mrs. Chen gave Zara a beautiful silk shawl that had belonged to her own mother in China. Even some of the cowboys who had once mocked her education seemed grudgingly approving, perhaps recognizing that Adam Xavier was a man who knew his own mind. Zara wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers that Adam had picked that morning. As she walked down the aisle toward him, she saw in his eyes everything she had ever wanted: love and respect and partnership and intellectual kinship. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Adam kissed her thoroughly, to the cheers and applause of the congregation. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, learning to share space and merge two independent lives into one partnership. Zara continued teaching, rising early to prepare lessons and returning to the ranch each afternoon. Adam rearranged his schedule to be near the house when she arrived home, and they would spend the evenings reading together, discussing their respective days, planning for the future. In the spring, Zara discovered she was pregnant. She was both thrilled and terrified, worried about how motherhood would affect her teaching. Adam held her close and reminded her that they would figure it out together. "You do not have to choose between being a mother and being a teacher," he said firmly. "We will find a way to honor both roles. Perhaps we could hire someone to help with the house and the baby during school hours, or perhaps you could teach fewer days for a time. There are solutions, Zara. We just have to be creative." Their son was born in December 1879, during a rare Texas snowstorm that left the world white and quiet. They named him Thomas, after Zara's grandfather, and he came into the world howling with indignation at the cold. Adam held his son with such tenderness that Zara fell in love with him all over again, seeing this strong, educated man reduced to awed wonder by a tiny baby. "He is perfect," Adam whispered, tracing the baby's small features with one finger. "Absolutely perfect." Zara took the winter months off from teaching, staying home with Thomas while Adam hired a woman from town to help with the household work. But by spring, she was eager to return to the schoolhouse, and they implemented their plan. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch Thomas during school hours, bringing him to the schoolhouse at midday so Zara could nurse him. It was unconventional, but it worked, and Zara was grateful for a husband who supported her determination to maintain her professional life alongside her domestic one. The years passed in a pattern of work and love and intellectual growth. Zara's students continued to thrive under her demanding tutelage, many of them going on to further education or successful careers. The town slowly adjusted to having an educated woman in their midst, particularly as they saw the concrete results of her teaching. Adam's ranch prospered, his combination of hard work and strategic thinking leading to steady growth. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Alice in 1882 and another son named Robert in 1885. Their home was filled with books and laughter and spirited debates. Adam taught the children to ride and rope alongside teaching them Greek and mathematics. Zara read to them every evening, the same classics she taught in school, and was delighted when even the youngest asked thoughtful questions about the stories. When Thomas turned 6, he started attending his mother's school. Zara worried about showing favoritism, but Adam reminded her that treating their son with the same high standards she applied to all her students was the greatest gift she could give him. Thomas proved to be as intellectually curious as his parents, devouring books and asking the kind of penetrating questions that made Zara proud and occasionally exasperated. In 1888, when Zara was 34 and Adam was 40, the town council approached them with a proposal. Winnetka was growing, becoming more prosperous, and they wanted to establish a proper school system with multiple teachers and perhaps even a small lending library. Would Zara be willing to serve as the principal and help recruit other teachers? Would Adam consider serving on the school board, given his education and standing in the community? They accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to expand the impact of education in the region. Zara hired 2 young women fresh from teacher training schools in the East, bright and enthusiastic educators who shared her commitment to excellence. Together, they developed a curriculum that rivaled anything available in much larger towns. The lending library started small, with donations from Adam's personal collection and books ordered from Eastern publishers, but it grew steadily as more townspeople recognized its value. Adam's service on the school board was equally important, his Harvard education and practical experience lending credibility to their efforts. He fought for better funding, arguing persuasively that investing in education was investing in the town's future. The other ranchers and businessmen listened to him in a way they might not have listened to Zara alone. And together, Adam and Zara became a formidable team for educational reform. Their marriage remained passionate and intellectually vibrant. They still stayed up late discussing philosophy and literature, still challenged each other's ideas, still found joy in learning new things together. Adam ordered scientific journals from back east, fascinated by new agricultural techniques and theories. Zara joined a correspondence circle of female educators, sharing ideas and strategies with women across the country. They both believed deeply in progress and the power of knowledge to transform lives. One evening in the autumn of 1890, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple, Adam took Zara's hand. "You have any regrets?" he asked. "About leaving New York, about choosing this life?" Zara considered the question seriously, as she considered all things. "Not a single one," she said finally. "I thought I was coming here to teach, to prove something about women and education, and I have done that. But what I did not expect was to find a true partner, someone who sees me fully and loves me not despite my intelligence but because of it. You have given me everything I did not know I needed, Adam. A home, a family, a life that honors all of who I am." "You gave me the same," Adam said softly. "I had resigned myself to a solitary life, believing that no woman would want a cowboy who read Plato and quoted Virgil. You proved me wrong in the most wonderful way possible. Every single day with you is an adventure, Zara. Every conversation, every debate, every moment of discovery. I love you more now than I did 12 years ago, and I did not think that was possible." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was 12 now, tall and serious like his father. Alice was 8, bright and spirited and already showing signs of her mother's determination. Robert was 5, still young enough to believe in magic, but old enough to ask difficult questions about how the world worked. "I want to write a book," Zara said suddenly. "About education on the frontier, about what I have learned teaching here. I think there are lessons that could benefit others trying to establish schools in remote areas." "Then you should write it," Adam said immediately. "I will help however I can. We can set up a writing desk in the library, and I will watch the children in the evenings so you have quiet time to work. You do not think it is foolish? A woman from a small Texas town thinking she has something to contribute to educational theory. I think you have more practical experience and insight than most of the theorists publishing books from their university offices," Adam said firmly. "Your ideas matter, Zara. Your voice matters. The world needs to hear what you have learned." So Zara began writing, stealing hours in the early mornings and late evenings to put her experiences and theories onto paper. It took her 3 years to complete the manuscript, working slowly and carefully, revising and refining. Adam read every chapter as she completed it, offering thoughtful feedback and encouragement. In 1893, her book was published by a small but respected educational press in Boston. Teaching on the Frontier, A Woman's Perspective on Education in Rural America, was reviewed favorably in several journals, and Zara received letters from teachers across the West thanking her for giving voice to their experiences. The success of the book brought opportunities. Zara was invited to speak at educational conferences, to consult with other frontier schools, to contribute articles to journals. She accepted some invitations and declined others, always balancing her public work with her commitments to her family and her students in Winnetka. Adam supported every decision, proud of her accomplishments and never resentful of her success. As their children grew, They each showed different interests and aptitudes. Thomas, true to form, announced at 16 that he wanted to attend Harvard as his father had, to study law and perhaps return to Texas to practice. Adam and Zara saved carefully and made it possible, seeing their son off on the train east with pride and no small amount of anxiety. Alice declared that she wanted to be a doctor, an ambition that shocked many in town but surprised neither of her parents. She was fierce and compassionate in equal measure, always bringing home injured animals to nurse and asking detailed questions about human anatomy and medicine. Zara helped her find medical texts to study, and Adam used his connections to arrange an apprenticeship with a doctor in Dallas. Robert was the dreamer of the family, passionate about art and music. He spent hours sketching the landscape and the people of Winnetka, capturing the beauty and hardship of frontier life with a sensitive eye. When he expressed interest in attending art school in Chicago, Adam and Zara encouraged him just as they had encouraged Thomas and Alice, believing that each child should pursue their own calling. In 1898, when Zara was 44 and Adam was 50, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. The children were all pursuing their educations elsewhere, Thomas now practicing law in Houston, Alice in her second year of medical school in Philadelphia, and Robert studying at the Art Institute of Chicago. The house felt empty without them, but also peaceful, allowing Adam and Zara to rediscover the intimate partnership that had been the foundation of their life together. 20 years, Zara marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stepped off that stagecoach, so certain I knew everything and so naive about what life on the frontier actually meant. You were magnificent even then, Adam said, refilling her wine glass. Terrifying and brilliant and completely unaware of how you intimidated everyone around you. Except you. Oh, you intimidated me too, Adam admitted with a smile, but I was more intrigued than frightened. I had never met anyone like you, someone who was so unapologetically intelligent and ambitious. I knew from that first conversation that you were going to change my life. We changed each other's lives, Zara corrected. You taught me that intelligence without compassion is empty, that physical work can be as dignified as intellectual labor, that a man could be both strong and gentle, both practical and philosophical. You expanded my understanding of what was possible. They had aged well together, both still active and engaged with the world. Zara continued to run the school system, now overseeing 6 teachers and nearly 200 students. Adam's ranch had grown into one of the most successful in the region, known for its quality cattle and progressive management practices. They had built something lasting, both in their public work and in their private life together. In 1902, they became grandparents when Thomas and his wife Rebecca had a daughter. The news arrived by telegram, and Zara wept with joy at the thought of a new generation carrying forward the values of education, hard work, and intellectual curiosity that she and Adam had tried to instill. They traveled to Houston to meet their granddaughter, Caroline, and Zara held the baby girl with the same wonder she had felt holding her own children. "This is what it all means," she whispered to Adam as they stood together watching Thomas with his daughter. "The work we have done, the lives we have built, it all continues through them." Alice married a fellow doctor in 1904, a kind man named David who shared her passion for medicine and her commitment to serving underserved communities. They opened a clinic in a small town in West Texas, bringing modern medical care to people who had previously had to travel days for treatment. Zara and Adam were enormously proud, seeing in their daughter's work the same commitment to service that had motivated Zara's own teaching. Robert did not marry, instead devoting himself fully to his art. His paintings of Western life gained recognition, exhibited in galleries in Chicago and New York. He sent his parents one of his works, a large canvas depicting a schoolhouse on the prairie with a woman standing in the doorway, her face turned toward the sunset. Zara knew immediately that it was meant to be her, a testament to how Robert saw his mother's work as heroic and transformative. As the new century progressed, Zara and Adam watched the world change around them. Winnetka grew from a small cattle town into a thriving community with paved streets, electric lights, and a proper hospital. The school system they had helped build was now recognized as one of the finest in Texas, sending graduates on to universities and professional schools across the country. Many of Zara's former students returned to visit, bringing their own children to meet the teacher who had changed their lives. One afternoon in the spring of 1908, an older gentleman arrived at the schoolhouse asking to speak with Mrs. Xavier. Zara received him in her office, now lined with books and student artwork and testimonials from grateful parents. The man introduced himself as a professor from the University of Texas in Austin, and he had come with an unusual proposal. "We are establishing a new program to train teachers for rural schools," he explained. "We need someone with practical experience, someone who understands both educational theory and the realities of frontier teaching. Your book has been required reading in our program, Mrs. Xavier, but we would like to offer you something more. Would you consider joining our faculty as a lecturer, perhaps teaching one semester each year? We could arrange the schedule around your commitments here in Winnetka." Zara was stunned. At 54, she had assumed her most ambitious work was behind her, that she would see out her career managing the school system she had helped create. But this opportunity to influence a new generation of teachers, to share what she had learned over 3 decades in education, was impossible to resist. She discussed it with Adam that evening, and he was immediately encouraging. "You should absolutely do it," he said firmly. "This is a chance to multiply your impact 100-fold. Every teacher you train will go on to teach hundreds of students. Your ideas, your methods, your commitment to excellence will spread across the entire state and beyond." "But I would be away for months at a time," Zara worried. "I know the children are grown, but still." "I am perfectly capable of managing for a few months," Adam said dryly. "And I can visit you in Austin. Maybe we could make it an adventure, explore the city together during your free time." So Zara accepted the position, beginning in the fall of 1908. She found that she loved teaching adults, young men and women who had chosen education as their calling. She challenged them with the same high standards she had applied to her elementary students, pushing them to think deeply about pedagogy and purpose. She shared stories from her years in Winnetka, the successes and failures, the lessons learned through trial and error. True to his word, Adam visited her regularly in Austin. They would spend evenings exploring the growing city, attending lectures at the university, visiting museums and bookstores. These trips felt like a second honeymoon, rediscovering each other away from the familiar routines of home. Their love had only deepened with time, evolving from the passionate intensity of youth into something more profound and enduring. In 1912, when Zara was 58 and Adam was 64, they decided it was time to step back from their most demanding responsibilities. Zara resigned from her university position and handed over the management of the Winnetka school system to a capable younger educator she had mentored. Adam brought in a ranch manager to handle the day-to-day operations, maintaining ownership, but no longer working the grueling hours he had maintained for decades. They did not retire completely, both too intellectually engaged to simply stop working. Zara continued to write, publishing articles and another book on educational reform. Adam served as a consultant to other ranchers, sharing his knowledge and experience. But they had more time for each other, for travel, for reading, for long conversations about everything and nothing. Their children and grandchildren visited regularly. Thomas had become a prominent attorney, arguing cases before the Texas Supreme Court. Alice's medical clinic had expanded into a small hospital, serving a wide region. Robert's art was exhibited internationally, his paintings of Western life bringing critical acclaim. All three credited their success to the foundation their parents had given them, the emphasis on education and hard work, and never accepting limitations based on gender or convention. One evening in the summer of 1920, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times over the decades, Zara took Adam's hand. They were 66 and 72 now, both showing the marks of age but still sharp in mind and strong in spirit. "Do you remember what you said to me at the Harvest Festival?" Zara asked. "That first night we really talked." "I said many things," Adam replied with a smile. "I was trying very hard to impress you." "You said that we outsiders should stick together," Zara said, "and you were right." We were both outsiders in different ways, too educated for the Cowboys, too unconventional for polite society. But together we built something extraordinary. A life, a family, a legacy that will outlast us both. "You built that," Adam said gently. "You came to this town with nothing but your courage and your convictions, and you transformed it. You gave those children opportunities they never would have had. You proved that a woman could be brilliant and successful and fulfilled without diminishing herself for anyone. I just had the extraordinary good fortune to be your partner in that work." "We were partners," Zara insisted. "Equal partners. You gave me space to be who I was, support when I needed it, intellectual companionship when I craved it. You never asked me to be less so you could be more." "That is rarer than you might think, Adam Xavier." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the sky deepen from orange to purple to deep blue. Around them, the ranch hummed with the quiet sounds of evening, cattle lowing in the distance, birds settling in for the night, the whisper of wind through grass. "I love you," Adam said softly. "I have loved you from that first conversation about Plato, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Zara replied. "You are the great unexpected gift of my life. I came west looking for purpose, and I found that and so much more. I found home. I found love. I found a man who could match my mind and my spirit and make me laugh and challenge me and stand beside me through everything." They kissed then, tender and sweet, a kiss that contained 42 years of love and partnership and shared history. When they broke apart, both were smiling, their eyes bright with emotion. The years continued to pass gently. Adam's health began to fail in his mid-70s, his body worn out from decades of hard physical labor. Zara cared for him devotedly, reading to him when his eyes grew too tired, discussing philosophy and literature when his mind remained sharp even as his body weakened. He died peacefully in the spring of 1926, surrounded by his wife and children, having lived a full and meaningful life. Zara mourned deeply, feeling the loss of her partner with an intensity that surprised her even after so many years together. But she found comfort in their children, their grandchildren, now numbering 7, and the legacy they had built together. The school system they had created continued to thrive. The ranch prospered under new management. Their children were all successful and happy, carrying forward the values of education and hard work and intellectual curiosity. She continued writing, publishing her final book at 72, a memoir of her life on the frontier and her 50-year marriage to Adam. It was her most personal work, a love letter to the man who had seen her, truly seen her, and loved her not despite her intelligence but because of it. The book was widely read, inspiring a new generation of women to pursue education and refuse to diminish themselves for anyone. Zara lived to be 81, remaining sharp and engaged until the end. She died in her sleep in the winter of 1935, in the house she and Adam had shared for nearly 50 years. At her funeral, hundreds of people gathered, former students now middle-aged with children of their own, teachers she had trained, community leaders whose lives had been shaped by her influence. Thomas spoke at the service, his voice thick with emotion as he described his mother's courage, her brilliance, her unwavering commitment to education and equality. Alice read from Zara's memoir, the passages about meeting Adam and falling in love, making many in attendance weep. Robert displayed a painting he had created specifically for the occasion, a portrait of his parents standing together in front of their ranch house, both looking directly at the viewer with intelligence and warmth and absolute partnership. They buried Zara next to Adam in the small cemetery outside Winnetka, their graves marked by a simple stone that read, Adam Xavier and Zara Northfield Xavier, partners in life, love, and learning. They proved that true equality requires both strength and wisdom. In the years after their deaths, the story of Adam and Zara became part of local legend. The schoolteacher from New York who had been too educated for the Cowboys, until one proved he could match her mind. The Harvard-educated rancher who had seen intelligence as attractive rather than threatening. Together, they had built something lasting, a model of partnership and mutual respect that continued to inspire long after they were gone. Their descendants carried forward their legacy. Thomas's daughter Caroline became a civil rights attorney, fighting for equality and justice. Alice's son became a surgeon, opening clinics in underserved communities. Robert's artistic legacy lived on through the paintings that captured the authentic spirit of the American West, honest and unflinching and beautiful. The school system they had built continued to be recognized as exceptional, sending students to universities across the country. Many of those students returned to Texas, bringing their education and skills home to build their communities. The lending library they had started grew into a proper public library, its reading room named in honor of Zara and Adam Xavier. Decades later, when historians studied the development of education in frontier Texas, they invariably came across the remarkable story of Zara Northfield and Adam Xavier. Here was a woman who had refused to accept the limitations placed on her gender, who had traveled west alone to pursue her calling. Here was a man who had valued intelligence and partnership over convention, who had supported his wife's ambitions as fiercely as she supported his. Their love story became emblematic of what was possible when two intelligent people chose to build a life based on mutual respect, intellectual companionship, and absolute equality. They had proven that a woman did not have to choose between education and love, between career and family, between intellectual fulfillment and romantic partnership. They had shown that the right person would enhance rather than limit, would challenge rather than diminish, would love because of strength rather than despite it. In the end, that was their greatest legacy, not just the schools they built or the students they taught or the books they wrote, but the example they set of what love could be when both partners brought their full selves to the relationship. Adam and Zara Xavier had lived with passion and purpose, had loved deeply and completely, and had left the world better than they found it. Their story endured because it spoke to something fundamental about human nature: the yearning for connection with someone who truly understands, who sees all of who we are and loves us not despite our complexity, but because of it. In an era when women were expected to diminish themselves and men were expected to value strength over intelligence, they had chosen differently. They had chosen each other, fully and completely, and in doing so had created something extraordinary that lasted not just their lifetimes but generations beyond. And so the legend persisted, told and retold in Winnetka and throughout Texas. The story of the schoolteacher who was too educated for the Cowboys, until one proved he could match her mind, and how their love had transformed not just their own lives but an entire community. It was a story about courage and intelligence and the transformative power of partnership, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with a single conversation and a willingness to see beyond convention to the person standing before us.